Hi, this is Courtney Connell for Introduction to Liberal Studies at SUNY Brockport with Professor Christopher Price. The issue that I'll be discussing will be about breed-specific legislation, specifically answering the question, is breed-specific legislation justified? Before we go any further, an understanding of breed-specific legislation is pertinent. Worldwide, there's been a ban or a control on certain breeds of dogs that have been deemed aggressive in nature. The lists vary from community to community, but almost all the dogs that fall victim to this legislation are identified simply by the characteristics of the dog's appearance. In the communities who have enforced breed-specific legislation, animals that appear to be of those certain breeds that are homeless have been collected and euthanized. Those that have families are under heavy regulations, including muzzling the dogs within public spaces. I'm going to provide factual information that proves that these legislations do not improve safety of humans as it relates to dog attacks, as well as some of the known reasons that dogs do attack. I'll also address alternative methods to decrease the number of hospitalizations and fatalities due to dog attacks. This current issue is of particular interest to me because as a young child, I myself was the victim of a dog attack that hospitalized me and left me with 3 large scars on my right cheek. Although the event was traumatizing, I do not believe that the dog breed played a factor in the situation in which I was bit, but the way I approached the dog and the way that the dog was raised. I have an unconditional love and passion for all animals and find myself saddened by the most recent bans of pit bulls in Montreal, and wanted to get to the bottom of why these breed-specific legislations have spread worldwide over the last 2 decades. The issue is important for us to understand because dog attacks cannot solely be blamed on the dog itself. Many underlying causes factor into the dog's behavior that the public needs to be educated on, rather than pointing the finger at specific breeds that have been proven to not show significant differences in aggression. I'll be demonstrating how the issue of breed-specific legislation falls under the social science and natural science umbrellas under liberal studies, to argue the unjustness of these legislations. Under the social science umbrella of liberal studies, I found an article published in the Veterinary Journal. The article is a synopsis of a study that attempts to answer the question of whether or not breed-specific legislations reduce the number of hospitalizations related to dog attacks in Ireland since the legislation was implemented in 1998 through 2013. The study attempts to answer the question, which in turn helps to argue whether or not breed-specific legislation is in fact justified or even proved to help. Breed-specific legislation prohibits ownership or places restriction on certain breeds of dogs categorized as dangerous or able to inflict greater injuries. On the other hand, non-breed-specific legislations promote the responsibility of dog ownership. Based on studies throughout the world, breed-specific legislations lack scientific proof that are deemed unsuitable. This study completed in Ireland proved that breed-specific legislation that was in place did not reduce the number of dog attacks, but the numbers in fact increased. Over the course of a year, for instance, dog attacks increased by 1.5% of every 100,000 people. It's believed that these regulations may be contributing to an increase by misleading the public into believing that unregulated breeds are not capable of these attacks. Another article that I found to be helpful in my search under the social science umbrella was written by Dana Campbell. It attempts to answer whether or not breed-specific legislation is the answer to dog attacks. It discusses the problems that prompted the legislations, states and counties that have passed the legislations, and those who have prohibited the legislations, enforcement issues, and whether or not it's effective. The most important piece here being whether or not it's effective. The thought of those implementing these legislations is that the easiest way to reduce the risk is to reduce the population of these breeds. Many states like Hawaii, Oregon, and Montana have passed the breed-specific legislation in an attempt to protect the public from these breeds. Other states, however, like New Jersey, New York, and California have prohibited this legislation. Instead, some of them require owners to insure and license their dogs. The common theory is that upbringing, socialization, and leashing your dog will affect the aggressiveness of it. The reliability should truly be placed on the owner. A study in Maryland actually showed that $250,000 in a community was spent in destroying banned dogs. The task force recommended repealing the ban. The Veterinary Medical Association produced a report that fatal attacks in 9 years span showed that 25 different breeds of dogs, many of which not known in the breed-specific lists, to have fatally attacked over 230 humans. These studies prove that breed-specific legislation has no scientific standing and should be lifted. Recently, in Rochester, we learned of a tragic mauling of a Rochester resident. I found this to be of particular relevance to the next article of example, Fighting Fido. This article, I found it to be very helpful under the social science umbrella. It attempts to answer the question if breed-specific laws are the answer. Recently, the media has gotten a hold of aggressive dog breeds that fatally attack. This particular article stems from an attack where a woman and her husband were charged with second-degree murder and involuntary manslaughter because of their negligence in controlling their dog, who attacked and killed a woman outside of her apartment. The article amplifies the responsibility of the dog owner and projects stiffer laws and penalties on them. Any dog can bite. Therefore, breed-specific legislation doesn't create the effect that it's desired. This was said by board-certified veterinarian Bonnie Beaver. Many times it's truly not the dog's fault. It goes back to the common theory that a dog may bite because the owner has not properly socialized or trained the dog, or because a child innocently runs up to the dog to pet it or squeeze it, like I did. The Director of Government Affairs and Public Policy for New York State ASPCA states that we have laws in place that no one's bothering to enforce, and more of these laws are popping up to attempt to keep the public safe. For instance, felony charges can be brought on a dog owner for the first time a dangerous breed attacks. Another common theory addressed is that owners should be required to have a dog license as well as insurance. Animal rights activists, however, are worried that these theories and laws will unfairly affect dogs and their owners who are not contributing to the problems. The final article under social science, Preventing Dog Bites in Children, a randomized controlled trial of an educational intervention, explains that while there are many guidelines to prevention of attacks, such as leash laws, training, and dog owner education, little education is provided to those without dogs, especially children. The article provides alternative methods that can be used instead of breed-specific legislation, and it explains how to prevent dog attacks in children. The article also relates to me personally, as my excited nature when seeing a dog could have been the factor in my own attack. A study was performed by a random controlled group of 7 to 8-year-olds in a school in Sydney, Australia, or in 4 schools in Sydney, Australia. One of the classes in each of those 4 schools had a trainer and his dog come in and teach the students how to ask if they can greet a dog, the correct posture to use when greeting the dog, how and where to touch the dog, and how to look at the dog. A week after that training, the study began to determine if the training that they had received had an effect on the way that the students treated a strange dog. They planted a friendly breed and its owner outside of the school during an unsupervised recess. Of the students that received the training, 9% of the students did go up and pet the dog. Of the classes that did not receive the training, 79% of the students went up to the dog to pet him. The article shows that the training of both dogs, owners, children, and the community can have an impact on the behaviors and temperament of a dog. Under the natural science field of liberal studies, I found 3 articles to be particularly helpful in my search for facts. Is breed-specific legislation justified? The study of results of a temperament test in Lower Saxony studies 13 breeds in Hanover, Germany that were known to be dangerous breeds. The study took place in a controlled environment where they temperament tested over 400 dogs within these 13 breeds. They determined, based on a scaling system, if these dogs demonstrated an aggressive behavior by studying a veterinary examination, a learning test, situations of dog-human, dog environment, dog-dog contact, and obedience. Of the 400 plus dogs that were tested, 95% of these dogs acted normally. The other 5% of the dogs demonstrated some sort of aggressive behavior. The temperament test did not suggest that the breeds were particularly dangerous. I find that the information provided in this study would be very helpful for the public to see if it also factored in other non-aggressive breeds. So, in my search for studies that also tested other breeds, I stumbled across, is there a difference? Comparison of golden retrievers and dogs affected by breed-specific legislation regarding aggressive behavior. This article attempts to answer the question of whether or not the dogs listed in an aggressive breed list show significant differences in inclined aggressive behaviors. The article attempts to answer this question by implementing the same testing provided in Hanover, Germany, using a golden retriever as well. The study consisted of the same temperament tests. 58.6% of the golden retrievers did not show aggressive tendencies. Compared to the breeds on the list of breed-specific list, the breed was second least aggressive out of 7. The results of these tests on the golden retrievers did not show a significant difference on the breeds deemed to be aggressive. A conclusion of the findings of these studies: a scientific basis for breed-specific lists does not exist. Therefore, legislation in Lower Saxony was changed and breed lists were withdrawn. A number of behaviors have been found to create sensitivity and aggression in all breeds of dogs. Proper education and ownership and socialization of dogs from an early age is imperative to a dog's mild temperament. Finally, many of the stories that we hear of violent dog attacks are focused on the infamous pit bull. It seemed nearly impossible to find an unbiased study on the aggression solely from pit bulls. Though within an article, A New Pit Bull Study, I was able to find one study of pit bulls from animal shelters through the University of British Columbia's Animal Welfare Program. Like myself, the author of the article found it to be challenging to find substantial information regarding aggression studies in pit bulls. The article found most of the information that was suggested a certain and dangerous level of aggression in pit bulls came from studies that involved former fighting dogs and unconfirmed breed-identified dogs. Shelter dogs are ideal candidates to study as they come from a wide variety of environments and genes. The study focused on 82 dogs that were brought into the shelter, of which 62% pit bulls are 62% more likely to sleep in bed with their owners, 5% more likely to snuggle with their owner, and 10% less likely to show aggression towards their owner. Of the 82 dogs, 7 of them inflicted bites. Of the 7 bites, 1 of them was from a pit bull, and it didn't break the skin. The study found that individuals who adopted pit bulls provided a loving environment, an active lifestyle, and just little time at home alone. Aggression in animals cannot be traced back to genetics, but the environment in which they reside. Thank you.